Hi all, in this video I'm going to show you some of the manual shooting modes on a DSLR camera. Before watching this video, I'd recommend reading the article. I'm going to post below this in the description. It'll go over your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO and how all those three play in together to create a perfect looking photo. Once you have a basic understanding of how shutter speed, ISO, and aperture work with one another, you can come watch this video where I'll actually show you the camera shooting modes on a DSLR and what those do to the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So if you have a basic understanding of that, let's just jump right into this video. This is a Canon Rebel T3i, but the shooting modes I'm going to show you today will be identical across all DSLRs. So the first thing I want to show you is the dial up at the top of the camera. It has modes such as M, AV, PV, P, TV. Basically on some cameras these may be called M, A, T, and P. These are basically manual aperture priority, shutter priority, and programmed auto mode. So I'm going to turn my camera on, and I'm just going to jump right into this with manual mode here. So in manual mode, let's flip this over here so you can just see it right this. In manual mode, I can set my aperture and my shutter speed independently of one another. So I basically have full control over all settings on my DSLR. When I use the scroll wheel up here, this will change my shutter speed right now. So I'm changing the shutter speed, making it faster, faster, faster. I can also slow down by scrolling the other direction. If I want to go over to change the aperture, I can click this Q button right here. That's a picture of a printer on the Rebel T3i. I can click that, and then using my arrow buttons, I can go left and right, and I can say exactly what I want to change in my settings. So if I go over to the aperture here and click Set, I can change it here using my left and right buttons. Alternatively, anything that I'm highlighted over, I can change with the scroll wheel here. So the scroll wheel is highly convenient. I'm changing my aperture right now. If I click right to go over to the ISO settings, I can change my ISO with the scroll wheel as well. That's convenient if you use a camera grip right here. The camera grip has its own scroll wheel, so I can change those settings through the camera grip. So basically, in manual mode, you're setting everything independently of one another, which is very convenient if you want to have full control over your photos. The next mode here is AV mode. On some cameras this may be A. This is aperture priority mode. In aperture priority mode, you get to set the aperture, and the camera will automatically decide its aperture. The camera will automatically decide the shutter speed that it wants to use. So if I'm using my scroll wheel here to go left and right, I can change the size of my aperture, and then when I take a photo, the camera will decide what shutter speed it wants to use for the aperture so it's well exposed. Of course, I can change my ISO manually. I can change my ISO manually actually in any mode other than the full auto modes. Then it'll force me into auto ISO mode. The next setting here is TV. This is the shutter priority mode. It's the exact opposite of the aperture priority mode. I get to set my shutter speed here, and the camera will automatically decide the appropriate aperture for that photo, and it'll try to its best ability to get my photos so that they're well exposed with the shutter that I'm choosing. Whereas in aperture priority mode, it's going to go for the best exposure based on the aperture that I'm choosing. So if you want to do some cool motion blur, or if you're going to do sports photography, you would go into this mode. If you want to do some cool depth of field photos, you could go into aperture priority mode and shoot in that. Lastly, there's P mode. P mode is programmed auto. How P mode works is, let's have this display here. In P mode, I can change the exposure that I want in my photos. So if you notice this central dial right here, that changes the exposure of my photos. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to it. Basically, this will make my photos darker or lighter. The camera will automatically decide which aperture and which shutter speed to use. And the only thing that I'm dictating is how overexposed or underexposed I want my photos. So if I want really, really bright photos, I can go all the way up into this area and take a photo. And then I think it's having trouble autofocusing here, perhaps. But it'll give me a very, very brightly exposed photo here. So in programmed auto, you choose how bright or dark you want the photo, and the camera automatically decides which shutter speed and aperture to use. And then, of course, we have the auto modes. In the auto modes, you can't change any settings, basically. So that's those three modes that are going to be coming across all cameras. There are other modes here. I don't play around with them too much. They are the modes. For example, I have a macro mode, a portrait mode. I believe that on this camera, portrait mode will just use, I think it's an f-stop 4 or 5.6 for portrait photos. We have a landscape mode, a macro mode. But basically using the aperture priority, shutter speed priority, full manual, and programmed auto, you can explore your full range of options once you understand how shutter speed, aperture, and ISO work together. So check back for more videos soon. I'm going to be showing some more. But that's basically the shooting modes that are going to be common across all DSLRs.